Perfect. Welcome, everyone, to RWD Podcast. I am your host, Viv, and Real World Discovery Podcast is Own Academy's online thought leadership series featuring experts from modern industries, just like the guest we have today. So by subscribing to our podcast, you'll discover real world problems and solutions, gain industry tacit knowledge, and pick up insights and advice from an experienced professional on what it actually takes to succeed in the real world. So subscribe now before it's too late, and we're going to welcome our guest. But before that, let me give you guys a little bit of biography of who she is, and then we'll let her introduce herself as well. Okay, so the reason why I have Ashima here is because she is, what can I say? Okay, so let's start with this. Ashima brings a wealth of experience in the field of design and UX, having contributed to the success of renowned brands like Starbucks, Walmart, T-Mobile, and a lot more. Ashima's journey began after completing her master's degree in interaction design from the University of Kansas. She has spent the past 2 years collaborating with numerous founders to bring their product vision to life through the UX Guys. Now, what is this UX Guys? The UX Guys, it's a place where Ashima empowers aspiring UX professionals to differentiate themselves in the ever-growing industry. The whole UX world is a very interesting world, and it's very new. A lot of people are looking forward to getting to know more about it. And who could explain this better than the expert that we have right here? I'm going to give her the time to actually introduce herself as well. And then we're going to go through the question. Welcome and go ahead.
Thank you so much. So as Viv said, I've got a degree from the University of Kansas, and I had a great mentor, Dr. Richard Brennan, who inspired me to learn better, to learn UX better, learn UX principles, how it's applied. And so I'm taking that forward with the UX Guys. It's not only an agency, like Viv said, we also have workshops and curriculum for aspiring designers. And I've also actually impacted a lot of business owners who are just starting up and don't have the resources to hire full-time designers. So I have done a lot of educating business owners as well. So as you can see, I'm very passionate about this, and I'm very glad to be here and to help through Own Academy as well.
Before going through anything, can you, for the people who are listening to this and they might not know what UX is, can you give us a tiny bit explanation, and then we can start with your journey?
Absolutely. So UX is something that you can see not only in digital interfaces, but outside of that. So an experience of anything that a human interacts with stays with them in their psychology and their mind. And as humans, what we tend to do is we interact with something and then we start to build a schema of how that then works, right? So that is essentially what experience is. It isn't necessarily how a camera works. It could also be, how do I think of interacting with a glass of water, for example? Like, I know this is full. I know that I can drink it. And so that turns into an affordance. And so essentially what we try to do with user experience is take the psychology of what people understand and what people know of the world and try to make products, interfaces, devices more intuitive for them. And you'll start to see this as you go through the world, because you'll know which restroom to go to if you see the sign on the board. And that is also part of user experience. So that is, in a nutshell and out of the box, for you, UX.
Oh, that definitely was out of the box because I had a definition in my mind, but it was only limited to applications and like websites. I never thought like when you're going to the restroom, you actually know which one to go to. That is also user experience. Very interesting. Okay,
Mhm.
so let's go to your journey. First of all, tell me, what did you study at school? And
Mhm.
then the university, we actually know a little bit, but then how did you end up here? Because this is also, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like this is a relatively new field. So probably by the time we were studying, I mean, I'm 100% sure we didn't have it at school. Tell me that.
Yeah, no. So I started out as an architect. My undergraduate degree was in architecture. And technically speaking, architecture is a subset of UX, where you design for people's spaces. And what I had in mind when I went in was totally different, and it still hasn't come about. And that is smart and interactive spaces. Now we're just starting to see that come about, especially with AI and VR. So, so maybe I will eventually get to do that. But right after I finished my master's, the most enticing path for me was to start with interfaces. So as an architect as well as a UXer, you need to be equally analytical and creative. You can't be more of one or the other. Everything, every kind of design that you come up with is always validated by some kind of a proof of concept. There's always a reason for the way things look right now. There's a reason for why when everybody gets on a Zoom call versus a Skype call versus Google Meet versus uh, WebEx, what have you, everything looks about the same. You know how to hang up. You know how to react. You know how to mute yourself. So you need to understand why things are a certain way before you put it out there for people to use. And so that was just something that I was drawn to, whether it was architecture, whether it was UX. Really, the way you execute a design is about the same. So yeah, that's what led me down this path.
So that's what inspired you. You didn't see anyone who was doing it and then be like, I want to be that person.
No, I mean, I was one of the first ones to graduate and come back to India. Um, and I think that even right now, even though there's a lot of senior designers and lead designers and design managers who are at level with me, but they kind of learned it while working, and they took a different path versus me, who went more academic route. And I really enjoyed the research of it as well. So no, for me it was just like a really cool, interesting turn of events that got me here, and I'm very happy. I love doing what I do, and I love teaching as well. So that's how I got here.
I'm so glad that we have you here to also give us the love and interest that you have in UX to us as well. So just to sum the whole thing up, can you tell me the key qualities, name them, that are essential for anyone who's working in this industry?
Mm. So, like I said, you have to be equally analytical and creative versus what a lot of people coming in have an idea of, where they feel like they need to be more on the creative side and know the tools. But it's a lot deeper than that. It's more than the tools. It's about how people think and how they interact with the world. So you really, as a designer, need to be open to learning more about your users, taking out the time to understand what's best for them. And that could mean research, that could mean research behind the desk, that could be research interacting with your users. It could be having to advocate for your users against a business team as well. So you really want to kind of mentally prepare yourself for all of the baggage that comes with just the design and knowing the tools.
Perfect. So that means you need to know a little bit of psychology and human behavior as well. You need to be interested in that part as well a little bit.
Absolutely, yeah. So like I said, I took the academic route, and so I had the option of also taking psychology courses. So I took psychology and sociology, and that was all. It was all fairly basic. So even if you have an inkling towards picking up a psychology book or a sociology book, there's a lot of resources now that is just psychology for UX. And that's also great. If you have that in you, if you have that motivation and drive to self-study, that really would help put you ahead of the curve.
Mm-hmm. And can you tell us why user experience is so important in design process?
Okay, so like I said, every design needs a proof of concept. Like, why is this there? Why is there a certain feature? It's almost never because it looks cool. And it's always for a reason. So understanding the UX process will help you understand why it's so important, because it starts with research and empathizing with your user, understanding where they're coming from. What kind of goals do they have? Why are they coming onto this application at all? Understanding how long they have in their day to spend on your app. Because you may be, as a designer, spending your entire year or a couple of years just on that project, but for your user, they want to be in and out of your app in 5 minutes. So really, that's why UX is so important. Is without that, you wouldn't be able to cater to that segment of users. You wouldn't be able to retain them. You wouldn't be able to make them fall for your product. And that in turn, it translates to loyalty, and it translates to getting sticky experience. And before long, if you're able to design a product that can make an impact on someone, they're going to recommend it, and you don't have to spend anything in marketing. So that's essentially what the real ROI of UX is that you're going to be able to retain your users. You're going to be able to make an impact out there in the market, in the space that you are at with your product or your website or your service even. And you're going to be able to really just draw in those customers and retain them.
So considering what you told us, that your user experiences and what you actually said right now, then how do you ensure that the user's need and expectation are met in that UX design process?
Mm-hmm. So validation, there's so many different ways to validate your design. The first thing you want to start with is a solid base of research. And as much as you can, I try to tell any of my mentees that come in, anybody who comes in to work for me, is that you might get pushback from other teams about how long you can spend in research, how much resources they have. So you really want to first, even before you get started, you may have to understand that you probably will have to push back a little. Again, I'm just being real. this might not be the case for all of you, but especially if you're in either a younger company where the founders understand the value, or in a larger company where they have the resources and the time and are very, agile and scrum based. So yeah, so you may have to, like I said, push back. But if you don't, great. So start with a very strong research. Spend as much time as you can face to face. One of your like a secret weapon of yours as a designer could be ethnographic studies, which is more qualitative, where you could have a smaller sample size, but you could get a lot more insight if you are able to analyze and read between the lines when you're interacting with your user. So that has been like a lot of times I have been able to interact with users who may not have given me a direct answer as to what is bothering them, but I've been able to read between the lines. And another great example I like to give is Procter & Gamble had trouble selling Tide boxes. They did a whole lot of research. They went through a whole R&D process. They reboxed these Tide, I think it was the detergent, the laundry detergent, and they put it out there ready to sell. But after, I think, the first round of like really high sales, they weren't able to sell. So they went to research and they went to individual users' homes. And all they did was observe how do they do their laundry. And what they realized was that the women were breaking their nails opening the boxes. So that was the pain point. And even though that wasn't one of the questions that they had on their questionnaire or the surveys that they sent out, but that ethnographic research and the observatory exercise gave them an insight into why it isn't selling. So if you are able to analyze why a user has trouble going past a certain step in your app or your website, they may not tell you directly when you're at an interview, but you're going to be able to see it. So that's always a great place to get insight. So that's your first step, is strong research before you get started. And then your next great place to validate would be after you're done with prototyping. If you could just do a rapid test, just send out the mock-up or the prototype to your users and see where they fail. And a lot of times people ask me, well, I don't think we have the time to get to that stage and then test them. You could even do a rough paper prototype and you're going to be able to see how people think about the steps that you've designed for them. So that's two great places to validate your design.
Oh my God, I love that example, going house to house and actually checking what the problem was. Mind blowing. I love this. While you were talking about the part that you're going to get pushbacks, I actually have a question regarding that as well. So user experience is a lot about user, right? So how do you approach the balance between user-centered design and business goal in your UX project?
Okay, so for me, again, like I said, I went the academic route. I did also take business classes. So I would strongly suggest that to anybody who has the means to enroll for a business class. If not, definitely empathize with your business team, because you already know how to empathize as a designer, but now you can try to put yourself in their shoes. So try to see how they are more focused on the numbers and try to see what KPIs they're after. And then you can reverse design it or reverse engineer it. So what design decisions are going to impact those KPIs? And then you want to make it as, again, you may not have the time depending on your team or your manager, but try to speak to them in their language when you're talking about this. And talk to them in, terms that they will understand. So if you say, hey, if we put this feature at this point as opposed to another point, we're actually saving a lot of time for the user. So I'll give you an example for that. When we were trying to divert calls to customer care, but we still wanted our users' questions answered. What we did was, of course, this was before there were chatbots. So now we could always go with the chatbot option. But what we did was we saw analytically what are the most common questions that customer care gets. And so we started to take those questions and turn them into an FAQ section that was more interactive, that was searchable, that was easy for a user to go through and find their answer. And so that way we were able to not just remove the customer care number, which would have just been frustrating, right? Like imagine you have a question about this product and you want to call customer care, but there's no number. So that's what business had initially said. They were just like, oh yeah, just remove the number. But we went, okay, hang on. We can't do that. We're going to get really poor reviews on the Google store. We're going to get really poor reviews in general by word of mouth. So this is how we can solve it. And so we were able to talk to them in their language and say, okay, well, if we're really looking to make a change, it shouldn't impact the way we're perceived as a brand. And that resonated with them. That was something that they understood. So that's something that I would say definitely either go to a business consulting course, see how they think, or if not, no big deal. Just try to talk to them in their language.
So, just one question. This FAQ part is a part of your responsibility as a UX person to come up with it, or it's any other department? In this case, you guys did it.
So it should be content. However, the analytics were already there. We already knew the questions pouring in. And because they had a manual for those answers, it was all a matter of putting it in categories and going through a card sort of exercise, which is UX.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
So one of the core competencies we teach at Own Academy is innovation and creativity. And all the examples that you've given me so far is filled with a lot of innovation and creativity. Can you tell us what that looks like in your field?
So there is a whole branch of design, which is just design thinking, where you could be starting out a whole new app, a whole new system. And a lot of times it's all about the problem that needs to be solved and not so much about coming in with solution first. So real innovation comes in, I think it was 101 Design Methods by Vijay Kumar. I'll have to get back to you on that. But that book talks about how there are so many smart, creative people who are able to identify problems and have the drive to solve for it, but they aren't able to sustainably retain their teams or the groups that they form to try to solve these problems. So you could start a company, try to make a product, and you will find that it may not work out in the long run. And that's simply because everybody comes in solution first. If you try to really understand what is the problem, for example, I'll give you an example. Apple, when they found out that there were so many people downloading illegally. Now, this is almost 20 years ago now, or maybe more, but people were downloading music illegally, and that was something that was um, just kind of upsetting the ecosystem within the music industry, as well as producers, labels, all of that. Also, on the other hand, people who were downloading it illegally were having to face um, criminal charges. And so it was a really bad scene altogether. So that's just a problem. And Apple at that time just worked with, you know, home computers, and that's all they did. But what they started to do with design thinking, and this is something that Patrick Whitney would call abstracting. So Patrick Whitney is a professor at IIT Chicago who also talks about this. And what they did was they took this problem, they abstracted it. They weren't really looking at what were the current solutions, which is the MP3 player, because that was already there. They looked at the problem in a deeper sense, and they started to solve the problem also in a deeper sense. And that's how iTunes came about, because they didn't just go from MP3 player 1 to MP3 player 2. They went and spent time with the users. They spent time with, why are you doing this? And then they went back to the drawing board and they came up with a business model that helped them own about 70% of the music industry revenue the year they launched. So that's how design innovation had come about back then. And there's so many resources right now. If you actually just do a quick search on design thinking, design innovation, design-led problem solving, you're going to find a lot of really interesting and cool stuff. And I would definitely encourage anybody who is listening in to definitely check it out.
That book, 101 Design Method, was actually correct. I Googled it right when you were talking.
Awesome.
You have a great memory. One thing I think we actually forgot to talk about was the branches of UX. Can you tell us how many branches there are, what they can do?
Ooh, there are so many. There's no finite number. But yes, the more clearer ones right now are design research, UX research, UX design, UX writing, and these are and have been in the last 5 years, I would say, really prominent. But there's so much more, because now that we are going into a realm of XR, which is VR, AR, all kinds of reality, there's going to be more and more. And there's, there's also designers that code. There's also designers who have a seat on the table where, you climb the corporate ladder enough where you could essentially be, being more involved with the dev team. So again, there's really no structure to this. It's not as black and white as other fields, I'd say. Yeah, like I said, there's so many more that are coming up, and even I'm looking forward to learning more about where and which direction it's going to take.
One thing got me curious. So as you were talking, I think like 2 times you mentioned AI and like the whole new path that the technology is taking these days, and how UX will evolve as it goes with the help of that. So you believe that right now that AI is more, basically it's trendy with ChatGPT and everything going on. Do you think the opportunities for UX jobs are going to be more rather than less?
Yeah, definitely. So here's the thing. It's still not going to be totally automated. Design needs to have, um, because it's for humans, we need to have humans out there trying to understand what the user's pain points are. And there could be a whole lot of analytical data that ChatGPT could comb through and give you a probable answer. But that could be maybe a launch point for your next UX research. It could never really take over the whole thing. And there's also like a very common meme going around saying that for AI to take over design jobs, clients need to know exactly what they want. And that is almost never the case, especially if you're a freelancer or if you are in an agency, you know that that is definitely the case. And so, yeah, I think for now we're good. I can't really foresee that it's ever going to take over, but it's definitely going to enhance our research. It might help us shave a lot of months off of, uh, development, research, testing, but it needs to go hand in hand with a human designer.
True. I That meme is so funny. But also at the same time, what I've been thinking about is there's also this part that us as human beings, that we don't know much about UX, we don't know much about design. And at some point in our lives, we need that part. So we outsource it because we don't have enough information. That's basically why we also cannot say exactly what we want. And then once we see something done, like as a sample, it comes to us, we're like, oh, okay, this is possible too. Then no, this is not what I want. Then they go from there. They change their mind all the time. I think the lack of knowledge plays a big part here as well.
Yeah. I've had to honestly sit with clients and write the design brief with them, um, and have them double check on the business requirements before we start with the design work. So yeah, definitely.
Ashima, I want you to give us case studies where a UX design solution had a transformative impact on a business success. You gave us, I think, 2 to 3 examples so far, but
Mhm.
I want more. The more, the better.
Okay. Okay, I have a good one. So this was a pretty big change at, so back then T-Mobile was called Sprint, and Sprint Business was different from Sprint for Customers. And we had to come up with an entire redesign, and the legal needs of these users was totally different. Um, so that was a very big challenge of when do we capture social security, when do we capture their tax IDs, and this was something that the business team hadn't even identified as a problem. They just went, well, we're seeing all these people come in to buy bulk orders because this was a big business opportunity for them. So people were coming in to buy bulk orders, but then they were dropping off at a certain point, and that's all that the business team understood. So when I went in, I tried to see, okay, well, because we're collecting their social security numbers before they can shop, they don't know what a catalog looks like because this is an e-commerce experience. So imagine you go into shop, but then someone wants your information before you can even look at a wall of what kind of products there are. So that just changing where we collect their tax IDs, which was just at checkout as opposed to at the beginning, where the users then got to go in and see, oh, okay, well, I can go in for this plan and this device and this coverage and this protection. And then they were able to make their decisions on buying, because we have to understand the psychology of people who are trying to buy. And this is buy for bulk, buy for their businesses. So that it took 3 months just to change where we collect this. And it wasn't even a very big dev change, because on the back end, everything was the same. It was just a very quick front end change of where we collect this information, and what kind of information we show them, because we don't have everything that we need. So that, it was a lot of fun. It was very challenging, but it made a very big difference, because suddenly we got so many bulk orders. And that's a very big difference for any kind of company, even a big company like Sprint. Even if you get 10 more bulk orders a week, that's a lot in sales. So, yeah.
From my understanding, based on the answers and examples that you're giving me, is that UX plays a crucial role in improving customer satisfaction altogether.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. I mean, the more you're able to make it intuitive for your user, the less frustrated they are, the happier time they have on your interface, and hopefully you're able to make their lives easier, because that's really, by the end of it, that's all you're trying to do. And like I said, it directly translates to sales.
Makes sense. Can you share any experiences or insight on the challenges now of designing for different platforms? Let's say for web, for mobile application, wearables.
Okay, so are you talking about a responsive design? Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
So honestly, there are very few challenges if you know, of course, your tools as well, Figma, or whatever it is you're designing on. There's like a responsive feature that you could use to familiarize yourself with that. And you just, I'd say if you have a really strong style guide, everything else falls into place. And by style guide, I mean, know what are the rules for each interface, know what is the grid for each interface, know how some features might be different. For example, you on your watch might be collecting your heart rate, but you're not going to collect the same information on any other device which might be connected to it. So be aware of your information architecture. Be aware of, the basic guidelines of what is the best font height, weight for different ones. So if you are going from phone to watch, everything's going to be smaller, but you still need to follow those guidelines. It can't just be like, oh yeah, it's going to be a little bit smaller, so you can't just take the whole phone screen and make it smaller. Just be aware of what are these guidelines. And yeah, I mean, I feel like if you're aware of all of these nuances, and if you're able to empathize with your user, if you're able to actually take all these devices and lay them out in a scenario, which is I go for a jog, I record my heart rate, and then I take it on my phone, I send it to my doctor, or I share it with my friends, whatever the scenario is, that makes it so much easier for you to say, okay, well, these are the features that I need, and these are the features that I don't need, or these are the features that I need to highlight on the phone. And it makes no sense for me to have a call button on my laptop or my desktop screen, as opposed to, of course, I'm going to have someone call me or have a call link active on your phone. So if you're able to scenario map and empathize, which again is your initial research stage of your design process, I think that you're not going to have many challenges as a designer going forward with responsive.
So it all boils down to the research part and also having the best understanding of the needs in whatever
Absolutely.
design you're doing.
Absolutely, yeah.
Ashima, can you tell me, how do you measure now the success of a UX design project then? Are there any metrics, indicators that we can consider?
So, pure UX would require maybe a heuristic audit. You could do a heuristic audit for your interfaces. And that's if you go out and you look for a heuristic audit template, you will find it. There's 10 usability metrics that measure against, or you can measure against. So that's pure UX, but you can also collect analytics. If you are working in a bigger team, I'm sure you have someone collecting either Google Analytics or Facebook, whatever kind of analytics you are recording. Definitely check in with them and check in to see where's the drop off. Do you feel like you need to improve on it? And what is the percentage? I feel like that's the most important metric that you want to consider, is how many people are getting frustrated where. But of course, if you are testing before, it shouldn't be too drastic when it comes to a final build having problems with user data. So, yeah.
Now, what are some of the pitfalls or mistakes that UX designers should avoid in their work?
So I feel like simply being married to a design, or feeling like this is the best way and I just know it. Or it could also be, for example, when it comes to UI design, it could be like font, colors. Remember, everything has to do with psychology. Everything has a proof of concept, even the kind of font you use, the weight of it, the height of it. It all boils down to the user. So always keep the user's best interest in mind and remove yourself from the design itself as a product. You are just behind the scenes. So yeah, that could be probably another thing that that designers tend to forget.
Mm-hmm. You talked a lot. I mean, that's what it's user experience. So that's what UX stands for. So you talked a lot about what the client wants, how they want it, and also right now you talked about putting yourself aside and then making sure that you follow what they want, not what you think is the best. I'm thinking, could storytelling actually also play a role in UX now that humans are involved so much, and stories and humans, they just go hand in hand always?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's where, again, scenario mapping comes in. Of course, scenario mapping is more like zoomed into a detail of the story, but knowing where the product is in the entire journey of your user, that's very important. Also, being a storyteller always helps with UX writing as well. And that's something that could help you break down, that's something that could put you ahead of copywriters. because, of course, they also understand semantics and semiotics, but you could be that storyteller that bridges the gap between the user and the product and the information that you're trying to get to them at the point that they need that information. So definitely.
What is your advice? What advice do you have for aspiring UX designers who are just starting their careers, or only literally by watching this podcast, they are just right now thinking about starting this career?
Okay. So I would say, and this is all based off of all of these mentees that approach me, I would say don't just think about the portfolio and the tools. Think more about where you see yourself. Because there are so many UX designers right now. There's a whole influx of people who have gone through these boot camps and people who have done all these quick courses and taught themselves. However, the thing that could put you ahead of the curve is knowing your values and knowing what kind of people you want to surround yourself with, knowing the environment that you want to work in. And of course, that comes with knowing the kind of projects you want to work with, but go a little beyond that and know yourself to a point that you can outshine when an interview comes to you. So that's something that I would say.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed this talk so much, learned so much from you.
I'm
Uh,
glad.
but that's a wrap for today's RWD episode. Again, thank you guys for actually listening to the podcast. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Share this podcast honestly with your friends, because if not, they're missing a huge thing. And to our industry expert, Ashima, thank you so much for generously sharing your learnings and insight with us today. I had such a blast talking to you and learned so much.
Thank you for having me. I had a blast myself.
Go ahead and say your goodbyes to the audience, and then I can do mine and we wrap it all up.
Awesome. Okay, well, as we discussed earlier in the podcast, I love to teach, I love to mentor. So feel free to find me on my socials, on LinkedIn. I'm happy to answer questions. I'm happy to have you on my Discord community. I'm happy to help however I can. So have a good one, and good luck with your UX career, your journey. Have fun with it.
Thank you so much. You're such a beautiful soul. Thank you all for listening. This was yet another episode of our WD. Until next time, bye bye.